an Indian composer who has been working in the Indian film industry as a film composer since 2013 and is best known for his score from the Bollywood film Bajirao Mastani. Today, Sanchit will give an insight into his creative process, showing his approach from original composition through to orchestration and recording using a working example score from this Indian epic. I would also like to invite Mr. Rob Cowan, CEO and founder of Point Blank Music School UK, to introduce and lead this session forward. Starting his musical journey as a bass player, Rob went on to become a music producer at London's famous Matrix Studios before setting up Point Blank in 1994. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. I'm Rob Cowan. I'm the CEO and founder of Point Blank Music School, voted Best Electronic Music School by the readers of DJ Mag. We have schools in London, in Los Angeles, in Ibiza, online, and hopefully soon to be Mumbai. So I'm delighted to be here this morning with one of our extremely talented graduates, Sanchit Balhara. Sanchit is an award-winning film composer, and so we're very privileged to have him here today to talk us through a score that he's created for the Indian epic called Bajirao Mastani. And so what he's got today is some clips from the film, and he's going to dig right into the production and the composing that he did for this film. So, yeah, Sanchit, without further ado, please let's find out what happened.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Rob and Point Blank for making this event possible. And also, I would like to thank Palm for hosting this wonderful event. So I'm going to talk to you about the process of film scoring. You can't see me. Okay, all right. Now I think you can see me better. So we're going to be talking about film scoring today. How many of us are composers here? Oh, fantastic. And rest of us are musicians, I believe. Okay. How many of you have seen Bajirao Mastani? All of you. Wow, fantastic. I believe Mr. Bansali would be pleased to know that. So the first thing I would want to start with is like, what is film scoring? Film scoring, it's a collaborative art, as very well mentioned by one of the great legends, Alan Silvestri. It's not music for its own sake. It's a collaborative art. You have to collaborate with the visions of filmmaker, with the director's vision. You have to follow up. You have to probably give up your own theories and your own ideas just for the sake of collaboration. So to understand film scoring, we must understand filmmaking. It is involved with a lot of other collaborations like cinematography, choreography, costumes, sound design, a lot of things. So composing score is also a part of that. Whereas composing score comes into the post-production, sometimes it's also involved in the pre-production parts where you have a good reputation with the director, you have good understanding of him. He might share the script's initial draft with you so that you get to know what's going to happen, how he's going to shoot, so that you can start with the process right away. How it happened with me, my director, Mr. Bansali, he spoke to me before he went on to shoot. And it really helped me out because after he was done shooting, my ideas, I had enough time to have a second look on what I had initially thought. So, well, to not take a lot of time with speaking, I would start with one of the scenes. As you have seen Bajirao Mastani, there was a war sequence, which is highly collaborative with a lot of music. So, and then we'll start about how did I get on to doing that. Can you increase the volume a bit? Can you increase the volume a bit?
बुंदेलखंड तुम्हारा एहसान तुम्हारे फर्ज को एहसान मत बनाइए पिताजी। आप जब आदेश दीजिए हम पेशवा को आगाह करते हैं।
right. So now, before we come back to the scene again, I want to tell you the process which involves to reaching this stage. How do I approach film scoring, like any particular score? I first like to talk to the director. What is his vision? It's a very subjective approach. Like if you're working with 5 different directors, they might have different opinions about music. You cannot have a general rule. Like example, if I'm doing a war scene in this movie, another war scene could be done completely differently, depending on how does the director want it. So what are the key points before I reach this stage? I first would like to know the characters, the main lead characters. What have they been doing in their history? Example, what's the film about? It's a story. Maybe like you guys have your own characteristics, and if someone writes a sequence of your life, that might be transformed into a movie. So that's what happens. Example for Bajirao. Bajirao had his own characteristic. And when these situations happened in his life, that's what we were trying to show in the movie. So first of all, just get the character straight in your head. And then what are the things which help in translating those characteristics into music? First thing is the key signature. That's how I start with. A scale, a mode particularly, gives me a lot of idea about the emotions a character might be living with. Like some people easily give a straight up answer for major is highly related to the happy mood and minor is related to the sad mood. Whereas I see it's more like a color spectrum. If I may tell you, for me, major scale is probably the white part, which reflects everything, and a minor is the black, which absorbs everything. So anything which is played in major key, for me, is like things are happening. You do not have any control on that, but things are happening. It could be happy, it could be sad. You might have seen a lot of situations in movies where some melody is played in major key, but yet it's sad, because things are just happening. At the same time, when you go more into the deep emotions, you get into the minor stage, where you have more control on your emotions. What do you want? What do you desire? So when I was writing for Bajirao Mastani theme, the first thing I want to get straight is the scale I'm going to follow, the key signature, the scale, and the time signature I'm going to be following. Why do I say time signature? Because I like to understand the folk element of the region the film is made for. As Bajirao Mastani is highly dominating Marathi culture. So we all know Marathi rhythms are highly played in triplets. So tak ta tak ta tak ta tak ta tak. You can easily get it's a Marathi rhythm. So I was pretty straight on that part. Whatever I'm going to compose should have this part as element because it will reflect Marathi culture to it. After that, to get the melody part, I thought as Bajirao was in love with Mastani, though they are satisfied with each other's attraction to each other, but yet they are not with each other. They could not get each other's love. So there are 2 contrasts in emotions to my understanding which are playing at that part. They have others' love, but they yet cannot satisfy. Why? Because the society around are not letting them because of some situations. So what I believe, how can I compose? I should combine my major scale understanding to the minor scale, which would give a... Why major scale? Because as they both have an understanding for each other's love, but yet things are not getting happened. So it should be complete contrast. So when I was composing that, my first half of the key went with the first 5... can we have the sound? We are not able to... Yeah. So, this point, I was thinking there is something joyous about both of them. And then after that, there is something contradicting to the situation. Brings a nice contrast to the whole character itself. So before I even started to compose the theme, I went into the mood of getting what the scale is giving me a feel of. So, it's also one of the rags in Hindustani classical. It's called Charukeshi. So I believe we can make probably 1,000 themes out of this scale. but what works for you practically and personally in that situation, you should be confident about. And how I thought about composing the theme, I tried various things. Then I spoke to my director. I wanted to get his vision as well, whether am I heading into the direction he thought of or not. So as soon as I got a green signal, I went ahead with starting to compose with the theme, and it went somewhere like. But at the same time, it gives a happy feeling, but yet something is not completed, if you get what I mean. So then came to the second part, as the film is combined with various different characters. Now, this is an emotion between Bajirao and Mastani, but I have to think about Bajirao himself as well. For that, I made a separate theme. For Mastani, I made a separate theme. And for the environment, because they are what two things are dealing a film with is the characters and they're dealing with the environment. So for the environment, I had to give a feel of excitement or sorrow or depression depending on the situation of the movie. For that, I created the Jire Jire Baji theme, which you might have heard. So now I will play the sequence again, and I will show you how did the theme come in place to show its moments. As you may, once you get the theme straight, you are already halfway down the track because you can play with interpretations of theme at different situations in the movie. So how did I use the theme in this place? I think you might be able to get where I stop it and show it to you. So as of now, you can understand like both the armies are preparing for each other, and
मस्तानी मराठा फौज आ गई।
हम बुंदेलखंड तुम्हारा एहसान करें।
हमारे फर्ज को एहसान नहीं बनाया पिताजी। आप जंग का आदेश दीजिए, पेशवा को आगाह करते हैं।
charged up to motivate his own army. That's where his emotions are coming out. And so that's the first place where I used Bajirao's character theme. So it's not yet, the Jire Jire Baji has not yet come because it's his emotions which are driving at the moment to get into the war, to actually prepare his army to go with an approach. So once this started going, if you remember...
Can I just ask you a quick question
as well?
Please. When you were creating the sounds for this, were they... Or did you use live musicians, or were these the sound, the orchestrated sounds?
It's a combined process. I believe in my working process, I do 100% of the work on my inbox, but yet it's only 30% what comes out because 70% gets replaced by the live orchestration. So this is an important point because nowadays everything has become digital. Like back in 70s and 80s, what people used to work as, like, the director would not even get to hear how the soundtrack is going to sound right until 1 month before the actual thing is happening, before the release date. So they would be highly skeptical whether it's going to work properly or not. If you remember a film called Chinatown, it was like one of the disasters in terms of the composer's reputation because they fired the composer 10 days before the release date, right in before Jerry Goldsmith came in and made an Oscar-nominated score. So back in days, everything was analog and film-based, so you didn't have a lot of options to play around with the sound. But nowadays, as everything is digital, as Rob was asking, you have to be prepared to get as close to the real orchestration as possible before you present it to your director. Because you are a musician, your director might not be. Not everyone can be Sanjay Leela Bhansali or Steven Spielberg, that they can have a musical understanding. So you have to get as close as possible to possibly show the perfect presentation. You won't have any option to say, this is the rough mixing, later it'll go to the final mixing and then it'll sound better. The director won't understand it. You have to be prepared for everything possible. You don't have to be an expert in mixing stages because you can apply your ear training and your ear basics just to do probably functional approach to the sound you're desiring. But at the same time, you should not ignore it. You should not leave it out. So now, when you're working in the scene, what are the key parts? Like example for the war sequence itself, if you keep playing the same music again and again, it'll get monotonous and people will get bored. The audience who are going to watch the movie, they might not be musicians at all. They may be, they might not be. So how do they understand music? They understand it with the subconscious. A music would tell you what's going inside the character's head. It might be a very happy environment, but the character is not at all feeling it. So how do you portray it? You play it by music. That's how audience would get it. So to be able to do that, what are the key points? First of all, you should remember there should be a place where you can actually change the key signature. But it should happen effortlessly so that it doesn't stay monotonous and audience won't feel like something has abruptly ended over there or something has abruptly changed. Then, important part is tempo. Before you even start scoring the scene, you should see what should be the perfect tempo to begin with. And then you should not keep playing it, because once you listen to a music, you must be seeing, like, once you start tapping to a music, after 10 minutes, you get bored and you start feeling it's like very slow, unless you have any tempo change or any other important change in the score. So you must find the points where you can either slow it down so that it can be increased again, or it can increase right from that changeover. But it's your personal and subjective approach, how you should feel about it. And use of the melody. As I'm saying, the use of the theme is very important part of a scene. You should not just use it just because scene is saying that. You should find a moment. Every film has like probably 5 or 6 major moments, and those moments are the reason you are making the theme for. What is a theme? A theme is not just a musical piece. It's a piece which could be memorized, which could be very easily understood by any person who's watching a movie. If you play a complicated piece, someone might say it's an amazing piece, but they won't be able to play it back. Like, any regular person should be able to hum it. If I say Superman theme, you can easily recall Williams' iconic theme. If I tell you about Pirates of Caribbean, you can easily play it because they are the themes which could be memorized. But if I tell you some of the sequences from the movie, which I'm personally amazed with, but you can't hum, you'd feel like, it's good, but you can't take it to anywhere. So theme has its own importance, whereas the rest of the arrangement in the score has its own importance. So an important part, when you are working in a film, the first thing you should remember, a film score is a 2 hours or 3 hours long stretched song. It's like it's one song which is stretched to from start till the end. Why do I say that? If you take approach to every scene differently, you would not have a symmetry throughout the movie, and any audience would feel they won't even be able to get involved in the scene. They won't even be able to understand any emotion what's happening. So you should maintain the symmetry of sound, tonal aspects, and the instrumentation throughout the film. Every story is linear. Like, it has a starting point, it has an ending point. So that's why you should consider a score as a long stretch song. That's what I mean. So when coming back to the scene itself, as I was talking about the rhythm change and the use of rhythm. Till now, haven't got any percussion. Percussions are getting built and built. So example, you must have noticed I didn't immediately bring my percussion. It was gradually getting built and built, and the final, when Mastani comes out of the door, it gets to the largest point. When you're choosing a percussion, you have to always consult with your sound designer. Because, example, it's a war sequence. He might be using a lot of low ends with the galloping of the horses, or there are like lots of swords and cannons playing around. So your sound, your low end, your percussion might just get conflicted with whatever sound designer is doing. So before you even start doing, either if it's like, that'll be amazing if you're fortunate enough to have a reference sound design played along with when you're scoring. If not, then do go and visit your sound designer. Otherwise, like at the later part, either he's going to get compromised or your work is going to get cut off. So that's an important part. So when I was approaching this scene, my rhythm, I was straight in the head. Like rhythm is the first thing which will give you the folk culture I was mentioning. So whatever my orchestration is, it could be European classical, it could be whatever. But if my rhythm is Indian or of the native place, it'll be a nice blend of, you can say like world music fusion. That was my personal approach, and that was my director's approach as well. So now coming back to the scene, as everything is going to the same key signature at the moment, now here, if you may have noticed, I changed the key signature over here. I changed it to the fifth of my initial key. That was C major and minor, both I was doing. And then I changed it to F over here. Reason being, they were getting prepared, they were building up to have a collision. Once it's collided, you cannot have the same thing going on because the environment, the mood, everything has changed now. So it's important to give some difference to your music, whether it could be like, I could have, what other approach I could have taken, probably change my instruments or probably cut down the rhythm. But what I thought was perfect is change the scale, change the key. Because as C to F is getting higher, so it'll give like slightly more intensity towards the music. So now coming back to the scene again. Now once they are collided, there's like fighting from both ends. You have to give importance to the villain as well, because not everything is going happy and then the hero is happy. Now, as I'm progressing into the scene, if you can remember, there was a point where I completely cut off everything, and there was just low drone of trombone was playing. Because I wanted, before I got on into the characters, feeling for completely going to the next level, I wanted to give a pause so that my next music would start. And there was a tempo change, so I didn't want to just jump off the tempo. I want to give like a deliberate change so that like, people can ease off and then start with the next version, like what's happening, what's next happening. So now, before I reach to the Jire Jire Baji theme, I wanted to make sure the character theme is played once again so that it resolves into the final action of what he's doing. So at this point, I brought in the character theme once again. There you go. I think you might have understood what I was all the time trying to say, where you should perfectly use the theme, where do you find its place. It's subjective, but you should always know it. You should always talk to your director how to go about it. Now, as this was a war scene, I'm going to play you another sequence, probably more on the romantic side, so that you can have a better idea.
Can I just ask you another question again about the, I'm really interested in how you got from your computer to the orchestration. So did you orchestrate everything out, or do you have the sort of main parts, and then when you take it to the orchestra, do you work with somebody that helps orchestrate all the different instruments, or do you do that all yourself?
Probably 99% of things were done myself. But what the process is, as I was saying earlier, you got to be ready with everything as possible before you play to director. Sometimes you might have to compromise on not getting enough time to actually write in the way as the orchestra is going to perform. But if you have done your theory correct, it might come in handy when you do the final orchestration changes. And now, as everything has become digital, it's easy to translate your score from Logic to Sibelius. Right. And then you, like, if you have someone working with you who's a professional orchestrator, like, it can save a lot of time. But in my case, like, I didn't want to at that time depend on someone else, because I want to take all the pressure myself at that time.
So you write it in there, and then it goes into Sibelius from Logic.
Yeah.
For the score, for the players.
Yeah, for the players. And I was making sure whatever I was writing was written for the players to perform. Example, if you want to write strings, and if you write strings like by just playing as a keyboard player, you're going to have a lot of problems when it's translated to the strings player. That's
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You have to write as if
you have to write
the string section, so you have the orchestra in your mind.
Exactly.
And every instrument you're writing for that, rather than playing it on a pad or a keyboard.
Exactly. Yeah. So in my work process, I do not use a lot of string ensemble patches. I use every instrument separately. If I'm writing a 5-piece harmony, I would use violin 1, violin 2, violas, cello, and double basses. If I'm writing a 7-piece or a 9-piece harmony, I would reuse my divises, violin 1, 2, and 3, and then violin 2, A, B, C. That way goes around. So it comes like really handy, and you must understand the limitations of a player. Example, every instrument has a range, and every instrument has a sound. Example, all of us, we are like instruments. We sing and speak in different tones. Similarly, an instrument has its own sound. So a lot of things could be taken care of when you're writing the parts. Example, you won't even have to depend on the mix engineer to clean up your mixes. If you have written the part, keeping the harmonics and the tone of the instrument in mind. So as you were asking, I believe, is it the answer?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I was really interested in how the process works. So I find it fascinating. And was it how did it feel when you'd written it and I imagine you're in a fairly big studio with it sounds like a big orchestra.
Yeah.
Was that a really exciting moment for you? Like when they're taking what you've written on the computer and you can hear this full orchestra taking that? Was that a great feat? I mean, how did that feel?
Well, this session was not all the live thing. It was a mix of live, some part of live, because everything was not recorded till that session happened.
Okay.
And as I am note carrying, as it goes to the studios department, like, you might not have access to what was finally recorded. Right. But yeah, as when you're playing anything on your computer, like, it is recorded with one particular tone. Though nowadays libraries have all the new round robin features and stuff, but still you cannot have a human touch to it. There is a slight delay and latency when a live player comes in and plays. So I was shocked and surprised at the same time when I was listening to my translation from the computer to the live orchestra.
It must be amazing when you see it all come to life, And,
absolutely.
And you suddenly hear the real strings and all the orchestration. It suddenly, you must jump up to another level in a way, because that live, you can't really replace that.
Absolutely. As to what I can describe, like, whatever I'm doing on a machine is highly robotic and mechanical, but if it gets alive, if it gets a soul, that's what the translation from computer to orchestra is.
Yeah. And so you didn't have it. You didn't have one big orchestra in a room. Did you do it in separate sections?
No, we had time limitations, and of course we had budget limitations as well.
It's expensive to get an orchestra.
So and of course, like we haven't had a lot of brass players in India, so most of the brass was recorded in Canada,
right, okay.
and that was remotely recorded. Like one of my orchestrators friend, he was in Vancouver at that time, and he made it possible for me to get everything come back to India. So, but yeah, if you get an option, nothing can replace like the whole orchestra playing in a large hall.
But that's how it sounds. It sounds like you've got a whole orchestra playing together.
I think all the credit goes to the mix engineer in that way.
Well, there's a good team there, definitely.
Yeah. That's another fortune you people can get to have a good team. So there is another sequence from the film, which is more on the romantic side. That's where Bajirao meets Mastani for the first time.
बुंदेलखंड खतरे में है, हजारों बहू बेटियां जौहर की आंखें सामने खड़ी हैं। हम आपकी मदद।
So if you can imagine the whole sequence when it was shot, it didn't have any. It was high-speed shot. It was very slow motion shot, and the director must be having something going on in his head before this music came on. Now, as we see this scene with the music, we can see this was made for that film. But before this music happened, the director was shooting without any music, but he had a particular thing in his head that something's going to be playing. So you got to talk to your director, as always been saying. You got to talk to your director how to approach and what's the emotion director is connecting to getting his music out at this point. So as you can see, when Mastani enters, you're not sure who this person is, if that's a warrior, or you're not even sure if that's a girl at all together or not. But as a composer, I knew it was Mastani. So Mastani had Persian roots from beginning, and though she was brought up in India, she was born and brought up in India, but she had roots from Persia. So I wanted to make use of a collaboration between Persian music and Indian music. So for Mastani, I used some of the Persian instruments, combining the rhythm of Indian patterns, Marathi rhythm, because Bajirao was fighting along. So you have to make something marry together when you're composing for two different environments and two different cultures. How you do it is your personal approach. So as before Bajirao actually saw it was Mastani, I used a progression to my theme, if you can. Right now it's still in the mystery. It's the first time Mastani is getting shown. There you go. Now I'll give you another example in the same scene, how the exactly same theme is used in a different way later on.
इस गुस्ताखी के लिए तुम अपनी जान गंवा सकती हो।
परवाह नहीं। बुंदेलखंड से निकलते वक्त कसम खाई थी कि आएंगे तो पेशवा बाजीराव को लेकर आएंगे, वरना नहीं। खुदा समझकर हाथ फैलाया, पर आप तो इंसान भी ना निकले।
नाम क्या है तुम्हारा?
मस्तानी।
हमें आपकी सोच, आपकी हिम्मत और आपकी मदद मांगने का अंदाज पसंद आया। बड़ा उठाओ पंत, बुंदेलखंड जाना।
श्रीमंत छत्रपति को क्या जवाब देंगे?
छत्रपति को जानकर खुशी होगी, एक हिंदू राजा दूसरे हिंदू राजा की मदद करने जा रहा है। ऐसे बुंदेलखंड का रास्ता कितनी दूर है?
5 दिन।
हम उसे 2 दिन में तय करेंगे।
नामुमकिन।
ऐसे दुश्मन को सोचना। बाजीराव की रफ्तार ही बाजीराव की पहचान है। मस्तानी।
If you can see, it was the same set of notes, but used slightly differently. Because you still have one side of Bajirao looking at Mastani. He has a love feeling for her. But at the same time, they are going to the war. So the arrangement, the time signature, a lot of other things, the instrumentation had to be changed, keeping the same emotions in mind. So that's where your theme comes in place. Like, you know, once your notes are set with the arrangement, you can always play around depending on what your situation is. But the first thing is like get your theme straight. So now coming to what Rob asked earlier as well, like, you know, if I do a lot of things on computer, I wanna especially tell you about this thing. Nowadays, how I process about, like, you know, once I'm ready with my music, how do I approach before it goes to the mix engineer? I make sure everything is labeled properly. Otherwise, your mix engineer is going to have a lot of problems. He's going to say, like, you know, I don't know if that's a violin or a clarinet. He won't even be able to distinguish. He's not a musician as himself. So I make sure everything is labeled correctly. And I work in a lot of groups. How many guys here use a DAW to produce music? Mostly all of you. So yeah, my process involves a lot of grouping. Like example, if I'm using strings, my violins and my violas would first go to a group. Like on the channel strip, I do a lot of EQing and processing, and they further go to a group so that I can save a lot of CPU by combining these things. Then later, with the further progression, my final groupings are just with 3 sections: mids, highs, and lows, so that you're sorted. If something is bothering you with that particular room you're working in, you can always stick around a little bit, and you won't have to go down to the channel strip again and again.
And do you, once you've recorded the original idea, then you get the recording back, do you just then replace over with the, is that how you do it? Or?
It depends. Example, if I'm not fortunate enough to get the same level of orchestration, I mean with the level I mean the number of players. If I had written my music with probably 12 violins and 8 violas, or maybe 4 double basses, or cellos and double basses to be played, and if I am only fortunate to get like a quartet, then I might have to play it along with my existing sound, so that I still have the live feel, but yet it is sounding as big as it was earlier.
Yeah, because I mean, I think you'll all agree it sounds amazing, and I get this picture of this huge orchestra playing, and when you were saying, well, that's not the reality, but it works so well, that blend, you don't really hear the sort of computer generated, it all sounds live, which is, I think you get that effect by adding in the live with and blending it in.
Nowadays, if you're using the mostly like contact-based libraries or some other libraries, they have like reached a very next level of realism. Like you can, with your MIDI controllers, you can actually get highly realistic feel. If you see some of the solo instruments by sample modeling, they're doing an amazing job. Like you can get very realistic using your breath controller and stuff. So, but yet, like if you have the budget, then nothing can replace the live feel ever. So
even if you can only get 1 or 2 players, it's still, if you can, whatever you can get is worth doing. If you can just.
For me, what's more important? For me, what actually gives a human feel is not just the playing itself. It's the place where it's recorded. You know, the early reflections play a lot of role. Example, like, you know, one of the most underplayed or maybe underrated effects while mixing a film score is reverb. We just use like any space which we feel should give a good sound of a reverb. But whereas reverb is one of the most important while playing with the orchestration, because your music is going to be playing behind the dialogues. It should never overpower the dialogues of the people. So if you want to keep your music playing at the same level, but yet do not disturb with the dialogues, you should be using a lot of ERs and reverb so that like it's coming slightly delayed from the original point. Yeah. So
You work with a mix. So when you've finished everything here, you feel like you've got to the point. You take it into a mix studio and you sit with a mix engineer, and then how long do you do it? How long does that process take of the mixing?
Actually, good thing you pointed it out. See, nowadays I was talking about everything is digital, so you might not have a luxury of just finalizing the score. There might be changes right until a week before.
Right.
Like I was sitting in the mix room probably 3 days before the film's release, and we were still making changes. There were musical changes made at that point, only for the betterment of the movie. And the first thing about when you're getting the film score is like give up a lot of things. Like you gotta be giving up a lot of your personal emotions aside, because you are collaborating a team who wants to make the film as good as possible. So you gotta be ready till the film's release. You gotta be ready for any changes possible. And as you were asking, I was sitting in the mix room back and forth again and again. Right. Once the thing was finalized, I went to the final mix, but then again, I thought there could be some betterment in it. I went in and recorded some more live sounds and went to the studio again. So I think
the final mix wasn't, in fact, the final mix in the end. You came back and did it. You kept changing it right until the end.
Exactly. It's a well-known joke, like, you know, how you keep changing your project names to final 1, final 2. It had reached to like final 11 stages.
Right, you're going to get final.
Final, probably, right. So, again, I was saying, like, you gotta be completely dedicated to your director's vision. You should not even think about showing your work if it's bothering with the film's vision. You should always give your primary thoughts to the secondary place, because it's only a film score or any other department for film is only to improve what the film is already at.
Well, I think maybe this is a good time if we want to open up for questions.
Yeah, sure. If
does anybody, I'm sure you've all got some. I mean, such an amazing piece of music. I'm sure you've got some questions of your own. So
I think they might need one of the microphones.
Do you need a microphone? Okay. Yeah, they have one.
Hello. Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
My name is Amit, and I am a huge fan of Sanjay Leela Bhansali's films. I wanted to ask one question in terms of there are very few films in Indian film industry where I think the way the songs are composed by another composer and the film score is done by another composer. Very few films do feel that they are like a homogeneous product altogether. So in this particular film, as I feel, all the songs and your film score, it seems like coming out of the same family. So do you collaborate with the film's music director as well? Because this is something that doesn't happen usually in Hollywood, because they don't have songs in their films. So in terms of dealing with how the songs are, so is that like a collaborative process when you do it?
Fantastic. I am very pleased that you have this amazing understanding. As I was always saying, it's a collaborative process. Every other department has to look forward to making the film as good as possible. When you talk about songs, that's the pre-production part. Like, songs are recorded without the visuals, right? And the visuals are short to what music is made. Whereas scoring is the post-production. I have to work the other way around. The visuals are already made. Now I have to collaborate with that. As you were asking, there are very few films here which do feel that same symmetry in terms of songs. And yes, as I was saying, I personally belong into the thought process of just going to the vision of the director. As my director was composing the songs himself, so it made my head more clearer, because he was already into the sync of what the film was going to be. But a lot of times, as you were saying, people do get a feel like, you know, this song or this piece did not belong in this movie. that's where probably when ego jumps in. You want to prove you're better than anyone else, and that's what I believe. That's where the problem comes in. Did I answer your thing correctly? I think you wanted to ask.
First of all, fantastic job on the film.
Thank you.
I watched it in the theater, and these kind of movies just have to be watched on the big screen with probably an Atmos. So I watched it on the Atmos, and I could almost hear all your 64 channels which were playing in full blast. So congrats on that.
We need more of you.
Yeah. So coming to the next part, I have worked in Bollywood. I'm myself a filmmaker.
Oh, fantastic.
And I do a lot of commercials and stuff. So I would like to ask you, in terms of technology and talent, do you think India, what are the challenges you faced? And do you think India is ready to be a global player in terms of just music and composers and stuff like that, in terms of technology and talent?
The very good question again. I believe, as you have clearly mentioned about the technology, nowadays we have access to almost everything digitally. Whatever's happening in London or in US, we have access to everything. It's about your approach and understanding of how those things are used. That's where point blank comes in place,
Sorry to interrupt you, but just because to help answer that question, in our school in London, our biggest number of students are Indian students after UK. So it just shows that, there's so many tend to be young Indian people wanting to get into this, and been coming over to London to learn the skills as Sanchit done, and coming back here and being hugely successful. So I think the answer to your question is definitely, it feels to me, coming from London, this is a very exciting place. There's a lot of things happening with music here, with technology, with electronic music. So from my perspective, coming from the UK, I definitely think there's a lot happening here, and it's going to go crazy over the next few years. So I think it's a good time to be here.
It's like, as you were asking me my personal opinion, I went to Point Blank in 2011, and I can't even describe the way it benefited me. I'm a film composer, and sometimes people will think, why are you going to an electronic music school? You're a film composer. But you cannot imagine how you can incorporate to your already existing thoughts. And that is going to bring a different identity to your own music. And the way the whole thing happens at Point Blank is fantastic. You get to work with the professionals. I mean, it's not just the tutors. They are actually working into the industry. And how they tell you how should you go about to the approach. And that gap of India going global, I think if you're working with the global people, you're already getting into the ladder. So is that the answer you're expecting? Okay. Anyone else?
Any more questions? Anyone else? Okay, well, I just want to say, I think we should. Oh, we have got it. So we got a question because we're just about to wrap up. Good, we've got one in there.
Hello. Yeah, I'm Tejas, and I'm a musician.
Hi, Tejas.
So my question is that you get a locked picture before you start, right?
What was that?
Do you get a locked picture before you start composing?
No, it's not the, as I think, it's not the luxury we composers can have nowadays. As like with Mr. Bansali, he asks me a lot of time, do you want to wait till I shoot a lot of things and then you start one, or you want to start receiving whatever I have edited? I personally, as I already know the script, as I already know the story, so I won't mind working even if some portion of the film is shot and edited, even if I get a rough cut, so that I get a visual aspect of the scale of the movie. So it doesn't happen as much nowadays. You do not get a completely locked movie, but if someone is following a conventional thought, then you might be lucky.
What I wanted to ask is that, if you have been asked for composing for a particular scene,
yes,
have you been told that I want a theme for so many seconds?
You want what?
I want a theme. Does your director tell you that I want a theme which lasts for these many seconds for this particular scene?
I think he doesn't interfere me. I mean, my director, all the directors I've worked with so far, they have never interfered me with how should I approach any scene. They tell me what's going on in their head, as they haven't even heard the theme yet, so they won't know where should the theme be brought. Maybe there's no theme at all. So what they would tell me is they would tell me what's the emotion which is going on in their head. And nowadays, like, not just nowadays, like it's been happening for ages, temp music, are you aware of temp music? How many of you are aware of temp music?
Yeah.
Okay, to the ones who don't know, temp music is a reference music which editors use while editing the scene. And with that process, director and editor get used to listening to that a lot. And you might have seen, like, even in Hollywood and some other part of cinemas, you do feel some soundtracks are sounding similar to another theme. That's where temp music interferes a lot. If your director is of your own understanding, then he might give you a chance to compose your own thing and not be dominated by the temp music.
No, like so then it would be happening a lot that your theme might increase or fall short of the actual scene which is shot.
It doesn't happen right at the beginning, but at the later part of the movie, once the director is already used to listening to that theme, then he might say, we can bring the theme here again, or it shouldn't be brought here, it might be brought at some other point, depending on what's the moment for the director.
It sounds very much, to me, this process is very much you have to put your ego to the side.
Exactly, that's the first thing. Like,
because it's such
give up everything.
collaboration with so many different people to really come up with something that's as good as this. It's a real team, and you might think something and the director doesn't, and you've got to go with what's best for the project.
Right. You got to leave behind any emotional baggage you are carrying for your piece. The moment he says yes, you're good. You say it's bad, you're just gonna give it up, but never delete it. He might come back to it again. So.
Do we have a final question at all? Oh, we do. We have some more. We okay for time? Yeah. Yep.
Also, as you said, like in films like these where there is a lot of sound design which plays a huge part as well, you definitely have to work around with the sound designer. But how do you approach a film that has it's kind of a very silent film which has very subtle nuances of sound design involved in it, but yet you have to have a very impactful score to really portray that emotion in that particular film. Like I'm talking about films like in terms of films where the content of the film is supremely emotional, but yet does not have the epicness to it. It's a very silent, subtle, a small world film, as I'd say.
As the scoring is the post-production, why do I say, why does it actually fall into post-production? Because it has to marry the visuals. The visuals have not to be shot on what you have created. You have to see what's happening, what's the room of music in the visuals. If you see, example, if there is no sound design, you got to find the room. How much space do you have for music? And that's what you get to know from your director. Does he want? And loudness is a lot of time, misunderstood with big impact. Even a small note of probably played on a flute could be impactful depending on what the translation is used for. So as you are asking, it's highly subjective and relative to the vision of the director. You got to ask him whether he wants a lot of orchestration. Example, sometimes there's not too much happening in the screen, but you play crazy melodies just to depict the thought of the character, what's going on in his head. So it's always the subjective approach, what the maker is looking at.
I think do we have any final one, maybe time for one more question? I think we've time for one more, yeah.
Hi. How much time did you got to score once you got the picture?
As I was saying, I work on scene-wise, so I started my work, as the film was released in December, started working somewhere around July, and July till December I was blocked for the whole thing.
And during that time, does everything else kind of stop and you just...
Exactly. As I was saying, you got to give up everything else. Probably if your girlfriend gives a call, you got to leave it aside for that time.
Yeah, you've got to just dedicate yourself to doing it.
Exactly.
It's such an intensive process.
Because once it's written, it's history. You know, it cannot be changed again. So it's in your hands how much you can improve it. No one is going to come back out of theater and say, "Can you change that piece?"
Yeah, you've got that, just got that window of time to
Exactly.
make it as good as you can make it. Yeah.
Exactly. But you would always feel like, if I see the scene, I would find like 1,000 flaws which I could have improved. But at that time, at that situation, that's the best possible way I could have done.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you.
Well, I think we should, a big round of applause to Sanchit here. Fantastic.
And to Rob as well for making
masterclass.
this amazing thing possible,
Thank you.
Rob. And you guys must be aware of Point Blank. It's probably one of the finest schools I have studied in.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Rob, you're doing a great job in making good musicians.
Well, you know, and it's great to see our graduates going out and doing such fantastic things. As I always say, that for me is the best thing a school can do, is can have people like Sanchit, and hopefully this has been helpful for you as well, getting a bit of an insight into his process. So, you know, if any of you do want to know more about Point Blank, please can talk to me afterwards, talk to Sanchit, check out our website. But thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege to hear you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be working with you and to be studied under you.
And we look forward to the next film.
What's that?
We look forward to the next film.
Yeah. Let's see how it comes out.
Okay.
I'm already in works of those, and hopefully it should be out in November.
Okay, fantastic. What's the next film?
It's called Padmavati.
Okay, well, yeah, we look forward to seeing it and hearing the music. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much for the wonderful session. I would like to call up Mr. Anil Chopra and Mr. Manish Gandhi to please present the token of appreciation. I would also like to call on stage Mr. Donald Whelan, Mr. Vijay Dayal, Mr. Mujib Dadarkar, and Mr. Vijay Benegal to come on stage. Also Mr. Avinash Oak and Mr. Uday Chitre.